This is William K. Murtaugh, Mert Witness 1. Greetings from the desk of Mert Witness 1 Live. What I'd like to discuss today is a document dump that was made by Timothy Charles Homseth on April 14th and another one that was made on April 15th. In these two document dumps, Tim Homseth makes continuing references to radionews.net. And as it turns out, Timothy Charles Homseth made a rather interesting admission. Now, anybody that reads Timothy Homseth's Facebook page or listens to his videos and so forth would note that Timothy Charles Homseth has accused me of a lot of things. And one of the things that Tim Homseth accused me of was owning a website known as radionews.net. Now, this, of course, is false. Anybody that has followed the history of radio news and how she conducted herself on the internet will know full well that I had nothing to do with owning that particular website. In fact, I was harassed, stalked, and punished by radio news over the years. And the primary reason that I was stalked and punished is that because at one time I had come to the defense of Timothy Charles Homseth. Probably the biggest mistake I ever made in my life. Now, I've gone over this before, and I'm going to go over it briefly again. Radio Newsnet was a combination of a Twitter account and a blog owned by a woman in Southeast Metro Atlanta, Georgia. She was an older woman. She went into forced retirement, and so on and so forth. And for whatever reason, she decided to make a blog that basically attacked anyone she felt like. And early on in the Haley Cummings case, she targeted Timothy Charles Homseth and a number of other people from the Casey Anthony case as well. And she would attack these people. She would expose personal information to these people, and so on and so forth. And in general, I objected to the way that Radio Newsnet was conducting herself on the internet, and I told her as much. And so she started in on me. And when I came to the defense, to some degree, of Timothy Charles Homseth, that escalated. And from about 2010 until we were able to get radionews.net shut down, these attacks continued. Now, as late as a week or two ago, Timothy Charles Homseth made repeated references that I owned radionews.net. And this, of course, is false. Anybody that's followed the history knows that. Well, as it turns out, I was going through some of the documentation that Tim Holseth published on his YouTube channel under the guise of the task force, since he's no longer allowed under his name to be on YouTube. I have the opinion that the YouTube channel was created as a way for Tim Holseth to get his material online and thus get around the YouTube prohibition, and it seems to be working to some extent. He's able to get the very same material out into the internet that was prohibited from him doing so in the first place. There's now talk that there may be additional charges for violation of the court order that was put in place by the Florida court, and that they may be elevated to felony violations at some time. I'm still waiting for words on that, but that seems to be the predominant opinion at this point. Now, one thing that came out was an admission from Timothy Charles Holmseth that was made on February 10th, 2015. And it goes as follows. In the 2015 release on radionews.net, publisher mentions a person named Mert. Mert is William Murtaugh, resident Florida. He is relentlessly stalked on radionews.net. William Murtaugh regularly engages the publisher as well as Thomas Norman Olson, suggesting they are involved in serious crimes. On January 3rd, 2015, Radio News Net published a release. The headline said, "Backed by popular demand, Mert's truck stop video. Warning, see attached." The release is clearly being published to intimidate and punish William Murtaugh. Now, right there, as early as 2015, Timothy Charles Holmseth had admitted that Radio News was punishing and intimidating me. Now, why on earth would I own a blog where I am punishing and intimidating myself and supporting people who at that time were enemies of mine? And this is typical Timothy Charles Holmseth. He will say one thing at one time, and sometimes it's the truth, as is this situation, and other times these are bald-faced lies. And this is the case here with this particular statement by Mr. Holmseth. Now, if you go through the material, you will find where radio did write a clearly false article about me. The video, the merch truck stop video, from what I understand, has never been published, or if it is, it's some kind of parody. I have not been able to obtain it. Since the blog has been removed from the internet, nobody has been able to find it. But this is an example of when Tim Holmseth recognizes exculpatory evidence and refuses to release it. He did it with a blog that was written explaining how the fake chats that he uses against me were created. He just decided that he was arbitrarily not going to publish that particular blog because it would prove him wrong, it would prove him a liar, and it would go against the grain of him trying to punish and intimidate me for exposing the wrongdoing of Timothy Holmseth. And also what you're going to find in here is Tim Holmseth did precisely what he argues that Kim Picasso should not have. He served a protection order against violence against his mother of his son. and made all kinds of false accusations in the um, deposition and paperwork he filed with the court and everything. A 2-year order of protection was granted, and the woman wanted nothing to do with Tim Holmseth anyway, so it didn't matter. But what's interesting is to see in the complaint that he filed with the court is that he made the same arguments to the court about his mother of his child that other people have been making against Tim Holmseth, that he was publishing information that is private and should not be out there. And Tim Holmseth complained about the same thing, and he went through a rather convoluted diatribe in his court documents where he said this. And so this shows that Tim Holmseth is something of a hypocrite, because he complains about not being able to do this to other people or having people protect their reputations, and yet, when it comes to protecting his, of course, he'll either file a lawsuit or he'll make other complaints and get people like E-Clause involved and so on and so forth. So the situation here, though, is that, Tim Holmseth does exactly what he accuses others of doing. Now, in the documents, there was a series of arguments about checks and so forth between Kim Picasio and her husband. Now, I don't understand why all this needed to be put in a court document. This is a personal matter. And number one, if the documents have been genuine, somebody would have had to hack the email account of both these individuals to get these correspondences. These are private email conversations between two private individuals, and they have no business being out on the internet. This is a violation of the law. It's a violation of the Internet Fraud and Abuse Act. It got Derek Lawsoner put into prison. And so whoever provided those emails to Timothy Charles Holmseth is guilty of violating the law. Now, it is my understanding that all the documentation that Tim Holmseth used in this so-called argument against Kim Picasio and her husband are forgeries. They're false documents. They were made up, basically, as the contention. Now, since there's no original copies of the emails, as is always the case with Mr. Holmseth, there's no way of forensically examining these emails to see precisely if they are genuine or not. This is easily done. But you have to have the actual emails, not just photocopies. And you can't have copies of them on another drive or something. You have to have them from the mailbox of whoever these came from. Otherwise, these emails are not considered valid evidence in any court. Instead, it's just a way of Tim Holmseth working his way around a court order and ruining the reputation of an innocent woman with 3 children, which has always been his motive, apparently. He seems to have this obsession with this woman that's gone back to the absolute beginning of this case. He has not proven one whit of his accusations against anyone. For if he had made good on the accusations he made to the court, the case would have been solved, and Tim Holmseth may have gotten himself a Pulitzer Prize or something. But that is not the case. Instead, Tim Holmseth is relegated to publishing a marginal blog and also doing rather odd videos on Facebook and so on and so forth, which I will be discussing possibly in a live stream tomorrow, or at the very least in a another presentation such as this one. Now, I would suggest that people download both days of these and go through them bit by bit by bit. More than likely, what's going to happen as far as Tim's followers are concerned is they're going to go in there, they're going to see the headline, and they're not going to bother downloading over 2,000 pages of documentation, or else they'll glance through them and say, "Oh yeah, he's got all this evidence," when in fact he has nothing. Basically, everything in all the court documents are more or less his opinions and speculation and documents that may or may not have been forged and so on and so forth. None of these have been through forensic examination by the government. None of these have been brought in before the court and tried. They've just been submitted. They haven't been argued. Nothing's been done with them. And the danger of this is that people like Tim Holmseth will take this stuff as fact and, cause undue harm to people that simply want to get on with their lives. Now, Timothy Holmseth has plenty of stuff that he can work with. All his conspiracy theories that he puts on the internet, he can use. Babies in the caves and all this other stuff that he wants out there. About 4 hours ago, he made all this stuff, about babies in caves and everything, and he does the Facebook videos, and he has a following and so forth. And so he's got enough loyal people there that he doesn't have to keep destroying the lives of individuals that have nothing to do with his theories. He can accuse vice presidents and Congress people all he wants. He just needs to leave ordinary people out of his fantasy world. Of course, getting Tim Holmseth to do that is something else entirely. He's not one of these people that listens to common sense. He's not one of these people that listens to reason. And he simply does not care if he does any damage to people's reputations. He does not care if he endangers their security and everything else. He simply wants to make himself out to be some kind of a special person. And because of this, lives are destroyed permanently. So, that's basically it for this monologue today. I will try and do better as I go along. This is a little bit different my drive-a-thons, as I'm doing this from my studio and not while driving in the car. Depending on how things go, I will probably do these more often. I am going to be doing the live streams, because sometimes there's things in the live streams that can be covered that's a little bit difficult to do in my presentations on this video. So, with that, I hope everybody is having a good day today. I hope you're staying away from the virus. I hope you're using common sense, and so on and so forth. And so, until the next time we meet, this is William K. Murtaugh, Witness 1. Have a good one.